But yeah, I guess we can begin, and even if folks will come in, you know how I am with talking. So, I'm Robert Buxton, and it is great to be back at Friends' Homes. Thank you for having me. And I feel that we saw each other not so long ago, less than a month ago. And for that reason, I've sort of forced myself almost in a crazy way to learn as much new music as I can for you, because I don't want to just end up rehashing the same things. But as one big piece today will prove, it's really driven me a little bit crazy. But let's start with this. And it's a crazy piece, and it is part of the context of what that piece is. So maybe I'm in the right state of mind to play it, perhaps. But I would like to do the usual. I like to improvise in the beginning, because classical music traditionally was an improvisational art, and then we stopped somewhere along the way. So for today's improvisation, all I would ask for you is going to be a free improvisation in a way. If you just give me a title for what I'm about to make up should be. It can be anything. It can be mundane, it can be serious, it can be silly, just a title. Anybody?
Summertime.
Oh yeah.
Wheat bending in the wind.
I like it. Wheat bending in the wind. Subtext, or the subtitle, Summertime. Yeah, I mean, I won't actually quote, but I like that. That wheat bending in the wind in summertime. How's that? Put it together, okay? Now, I wasn't even sure of the order of this because of the one piece, but let's work our way up to it. I'm now going to start with everything I'm playing now. It's so tricky, I don't know. But I'm not trying, I can't back out, playing it. I thought about it today, but it's too late, so. And it's the pieces I'm playing now, everything is tricky in its own way, but they're just so awkward for the piano. And that's what gives me a headache. But to focus on the music, which is what really matters, I'm going to start with an absolutely beautiful piece called Melody by Gluck. This is from his opera from the 1760s, Orfeo, or Orpheus and Eurydice. And this is a lament, Orpheus' lament for Eurydice. And that ancient Greek myth about Orpheus, that Eurydice goes to the underworld, and Orpheus tries to save her, bring her back. Then he brings his lyre, L-Y-R-E, not L-I-A-R, it's different. He goes to the underworld, and he's a very skilled musician, and he tries to charm Hades with his music, begs to allow Eurydice to come back with him. And Hades says, fine, but on one condition, you don't look back as you're going. And there's a similar theme in the Bible, in Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, there's a story about that. So, unfortunately, at the very last moment, they're almost back to Earth, and Orpheus looks back, and she's gone. So it's a tragedy. However, this is the age of enlightenment, the 1760s. You can't end something like that. So, when I saw the opera, it had a happily ever after ending. And they had this big celebration, and Eurydice came back, and everyone lived happily ever after. Kind of like that. So this melody is from an instrumental interlude called Dance of the Blessed Spirits. And in the opera, it's played by flute, which is going to be mostly the pinky of my right hand here, and orchestral accompaniment. And this piano arrangement, there's many arrangements. There's a violin version. There's the original, of course. Fritz Kreisler did the violin version, and you have recordings of Misha Elman and so many greats playing. Heifetz, I was listening, it's amazing. And then this is a piano arrangement by an Italian composer, Scambati, which I love that name. I don't know much about him, but it's such a beautiful name, Scambati, you know. And everything is like this for the hands. It's just, but it's so beautiful. And there's, you know, this is the kind of piece that pianists 100 years ago or more liked to play, arrangements, you know. Some nowadays say that arrangements are watered down or something. But there's a recording of Rachmaninoff playing this, and it is so beautiful how he does it. But anyway, here is Gluck, Scambati, melody from Orpheus and Eurydice. Or is it Eurydice? It's a different way. I think it's Eurydice in English. So yeah. going to play, I've been playing you many of these, and this is a new one of the 12, one of the 12 Schumann Paganini studies. This one is brand new for me. It scares me a little bit to do, but this is maybe the third or fourth time I've done it in public. So, you know, Schumann did 12 of these, and Paganini wrote 24 caprices for solo violin. I'm wondering sometimes, did Schumann, was he intending to arrange all of them? Maybe. But you know, this was an early part of Schumann's output. Maybe the earliest, or one of the earliest big projects he did was the cycle. And I believe that he found himself in translating, so to say, Paganini from violin to piano. You know, I mentioned before, I think painters and sculptors will imitate, they'll go to a museum and they'll copy, but it doesn't come out exactly as a copy. They'll try to copy a master. And in doing that, they'll, you know, discover themselves. I think that's what's going on here with Schumann. And the funny thing about these, I've played, I think, all of them over the past few months in installments, kind of, you know. The early ones are pretty close to the original Paganini. He just adds some accompaniment, and it's pretty much what Paganini did. As you get towards the end, and these, I'm at the last couple now, this C minor one, it doesn't sound like Paganini at all. You know, I remember Paganini was the wild man of the early 1800s. He was like a rock star. He was like a Jimi Hendrix of that time. And so controversial. He changed music. His intuition, his fiery spirit, you know, completely changed how music was. He and Beethoven, I think, those two. I mean, there's others, you know, Schubert and others at this time. But nothing was the same after Paganini and Beethoven. And that's why I think many of the Romantics chose him as a model, because he was a revolutionary. And by the way, this is an age of revolutions, the American Revolution. Have you seen the TV, on TV?
Oh, yeah.
Wow, yeah. And then the French Revolution, and Paganini was a revolution of sorts in music, Beethoven. So I mentioned that this doesn't sound like Paganini to me. It sounds like Schumann. You know, first of all, Schumann was from Zwickau, which is near Leipzig. It's in what was East Germany. And I was just thinking about this. This piece on the violin, it sounds sunny somehow. Paganini was from Genova. Maybe it's crazy to say this, but I somehow think the climate of where a composer is from influences their music. So Genova is a lot sunnier than Zwickau. I mean, I was in Munich in the summer, and it was 55 degrees and raining the whole time. And this piece is 55 degrees and raining. It just feels like today. You know, it has that feeling on the piano. The way Schumann, whatever he did to it, it sounds like Schumann. Another thing is Schumann. Well, he was a writer too. He wanted to be a novelist full time. He also wanted to be a pianist, and he damaged his hands early on. And then he stuck to composition, as someone said, thankfully, you know, because we have this. I mean, it's not that he's not a good writer or anything, no, but we have this genius of his preserved. And you know, Schumann, there are a couple things that really influenced how he wrote. One was the literature that he liked, the novellas of E.T.A. Hoffmann and Jean-Paul Richter. And they wrote novellas that would have spliced plots. You know, not a normal development, like you'd have one thing going on and then a totally different thing, and it's kind of a collage technique, kind of. And Schumann's music is like that too. And sometimes it's hard to register with it because he doesn't develop things in a normal way. He does fragments and he does splices. And there's also, and I think that's what explains how his music is literary. And then the other thing is, of course, his mental illness, that he was bipolar. And they didn't have treatments for it then the way that, you know, perhaps now they have. I mean, they do have now treatments for it. And so this, you know, his life was very difficult, very tragic. I mean, he had a wonderful home life. He was married to Clara Schumann herself. She was a great musician, composer, pianist. He had 7 kids with Clara, but he was a good father too. I've been reading, like, most of the composers were not, if they were parents, but he was. But he suffered so much in his life. And You hear it in his music, in a piece like this. There are two characters from his literary works, literary criticism. He ascribed characters to parts of himself. So Florestan was the name for his manic side that he gave. And then for his more depressive side, Eusebius. And this piece is more of the second kind, Eusebius, from the beginning. You might hear a little Florestan. There's some quirky march-like parts in the middle, but it's mostly Eusebius. It's just bleak despair. And how he turns Paganini into that's what's really remarkable. It's Schumann, it's High German Romanticism. It doesn't sound like Paganini anymore, it just doesn't. So here is Schumann's arrangement of one of Paganini's caprices in C minor. Thanks, Ed. You know, these pieces, even the Gluckenway, they're not, for some reason, everything I'm doing now is not the easiest listening. You know, it's just, it has depth, that piece. It has so much depth and soul, but Schumann is, sometimes it's hard to get onto his wavelength. And that's the case for the next piece, for sure. And I really ask for your understanding in this. I was debating, I don't know if it's worse, playing it from memory or with the music. I'll just start by telling you, people ask me, how do you memorize? And it's just suffering, many hours and repetition, studying the score, and sometimes it takes longer than others. And this piece is an example, and I'm not quite there yet. Stayed up very late yesterday, spent almost the whole day doing it today, and it's just one of those, this is a 20th century piece, and it's the Paganini Variations by Ludosławski, or Ludosławski in Polish. And I made my own arrangement. Maybe this is what's so crazy. I made my own arrangement. The original is for 2 pianos, and then there's a version, that's 1941, 1978 piano and orchestra, piano concerto. It's not a long piece, it's about 10, 11 minutes, I don't know. Might be longer today. The way I play it. But it'll get there, it just might take time, I'm sure. And I memorized it, but then it's just the memory. So I'm just asking you, I hate to say this kind of thing, but I'm just being honest, it's hard. Memorization is hard, and especially something like this. So I may need this, but I found if I did it from the get-go with the music, I felt a little bit constrained. So I'm going to hopefully not need it. But let me tell you about the music, because maybe this feeling that I'm experiencing is how I should feel, considering the circumstances in which Ludosławski wrote 1941, of course, was the middle of the Second World War. Ludosławski was one of the greatest 20th century composers from Poland. He's pretty well known, not as well known as he should be, but maybe because he was quite an avant-garde composer, and as is this piece. Let's talk about that. So, does this bother you? Okay. Well, when you look at paintings, you'll see abstract art. You know, it's a similar, analogous idea, and I get it. It's not always what I want to listen to either. You know, I'm not always in that mood, but sometimes I am. And but I think knowing context is everything. And the 20th century was a century, unfortunately, with many horrors. And I hate to say it, that we have that today too. But the story of this piece is Ludosławski was in Warsaw during the Second World War, and he didn't have enough to eat, didn't have enough money, nobody did. And what he did was, and he's already kind of an established musician, composer, pianist, he would give these concerts in bars, wherever would host him. And mostly two pianos with his friend, another composer, who ended up settling in the United Kingdom in London, Andrzej Panufnik. The two of them would perform, and they would write pieces for the occasions. Many of these pieces were actually pop music of the time. American jazz, gypsy melodies, things that were popular. They played as like background music, but they were also writing their serious classical compositions. Not that pop is not serious, not what I mean, but I mean, they did that too. But in many cases, the music that they were doing, like this piece for sure, was illegal for the Nazis. The Nazis didn't like, any music that didn't quite fit a certain box was illegal. I mean, you could be really put to death for it. Same with the Soviets, you know, the whole story with Shostakovich and the Soviets, and how it was always this back and forth, and they would say he's too formalist, meaning he's too sophisticated, he needs to be writing music for the people to understand it. They would purge him. It's all this crazy nonsense. That's the 20th century, crazy nonsense. And, you know, so, and by the way, Ludosławski, after the war, he stayed in Poland and he faced the censorship of the Soviets after that, which is just horrible to think of. So, there's one story that stuck with me about this time for Ludosławski. He was giving a concert, two-piano concert with Panufnik, and the SS came in. And they walked up to the two pianists and they put their pistols to their temple. And they said, this concert and this gathering is illegal. And we're gonna shoot you, we're gonna execute you right now. And the owner of the restaurant walked in and he said, no, these are my employees. And please leave them alone. They're my employees, they were not his employees. And the SS left. So that's the kind of circumstances he was living in. And everyone in Poland at this time, the Second World War. Eventually, Warsaw was falling, and he had to flee. All his possessions, everything was destroyed. He pretty much took whatever he could carry with him. And all the music he wrote in that period for the two piano concerts was lost, but he managed to smuggle out this piece. So that's the story of the piece. And it's making me feel crazy, and I think I'm crazy to even try to play it on one piano. But I was thinking about this, that maybe the way I feel with playing this piece is just a fraction of what he probably felt, or what he definitely felt at this time. So again, it's going to be very different and very dissonant, very spiky and thorny, and that's the time. That's what it was. Theodor Adorno, philosopher and writer on music, he said, after the horrors like that, horrors like Auschwitz and other, you can't just write romantic poetry and cute melodies. It just doesn't work. So that's my little explanation, and just a little understanding of the piece itself is, it's very, very, very tricky. So, okay, here it is. Good luck. too much suffering to listen. Because you know, it is different, but you know, it's an amazing piece. Even if you're not, you know, it's like food. If you're not into spicy food, sometimes it takes time to get, you know, you might develop that liking. And the thing about this, I didn't even mention, it's based on the Paganini 24th Caprice. I'm going to play a more normal piece, well I don't know if it's normal, based on that, Brahms' second book of Paganini Variations. But it's amazing how this more than 100-year-old piece, at this time even, 1941, Paganini died in like 1840 or something, that it lived in the rubble of Warsaw almost in this music. And so that's fascinating how this classical, I mean this old music is transformed into that. There's a couple things that beyond just brutal, you know, fistfuls of, you know, things like that, there's a lot more to this piece. There are jazz chords. Like, he played jazz in the bars. Like, what is this? He harmonizes it. Those are jazzy chords, and that's really, really interesting. And there's parts, you know, I was reading about Ludoslavsky. By the way, I found an interview of his, and he was, you know, so Polish. His family was Polish nobility. And I'm watching this interview, and they said, "So, Mr. Ludoslavsky, you know, tell us about, you know, your music." And he says, "Well, I began to compose when I was a little boy." And I thought, well, why? Panufnik ended up living in England. Maybe he'd visit him, and he learned, he had that English accent, so it was just interesting. But there's some, you know, he was a devout Catholic too, I was reading about him. And there's some parts there that just sound like Gregorian chant, like this. You know, so the piece has a lot in it. Okay, let me drink a little water, and then I'll play another piece that's also extremely awkward to play. All right, I guess I don't have to do my 10,000 steps today. Not that I don't do that for work, but it's good work. So we don't need this anymore. Maybe we do. Just have to yeah. My brain is fried from trying to memorize that. So now I'm going to play Brahms, Book 2 of his Paganini Variations. I think I played it for you last time, and it was pretty new then, and now it's about 3 weeks older for me. Just goes to show how many composers used and how you end up hearing them through the prism, not prism, but prism of that melody. And you hear Brahms here. Just, it's so idiosyncratic. So idiomatic, I mean, for Brahms, this piece, especially Book 2. Book 1 is very tank-like. I've played it for you several times. It's a massive piece, almost like that Ludoslavsky. The second book is a little more intimate. It's a little more melancholy. You feel Brahms's loneliness. You know, he was kind of a person of solitude his whole life. These variations here, like, I mean, it sounds like, you know. By the way, that's a real Brahms lead, you know, vegan lead. And it feels like that. And then you have these parts like. There's so much melancholy and loneliness and longing, probably for Clara Schumann. I'll talk about that in a second. Here's another one that just reminds me of like leaves in the wind or something. It's and remember, these are all snapshots of Jodorowsky. They're all snapshots of that, just distortions of. So Brahms, I've told you this story maybe several times. I played Schumann earlier. Brahms, as a young man, came to the Schumann's home, knocked on their door. He said, "I want advice," and they sort of adopted him on the spot. Not long after Robert Schumann's, he tried to jump into the Rhine River. He was institutionalized, and he died before he reached 50. Clara was pregnant with their 7th child at the time. Young Brahms was in the midst of all this, helping the family out. And it's in this context, there's sort of a bit of a rumor, which I don't love. The more I read about it, I don't like the fact that it's this overdone rumor that there was some romantic thing between Clara and the 20-year younger Brahms. Were there feelings, unrequited, strong feelings between the two of them? Definitely. It's in their letters. But I think it was more of a restrained Victorian era kind of romance. They weren't really like dating, not to be People magazine here. But there's a movie from the 40s about this. It makes for a good movie, right? And it's Katharine Hepburn plays Clara Schumann. Speaking of her, I just saw her in The African Queen recently with Humphrey Bogart. What a genius movie. It's just, but I love great films like that, but it's not historically, accurate. Just like Amadeus with Mozart and Salieri, it's a great movie, but historically nonsense. Salieri was a wonderful composer. He was not a bad guy. He didn't poison, anyway. So the same goes for Brahms and Clara, but they did have this connection. It was a musical connection. Brahms would seek advice, and Clara would actually criticize and give him advice on his music. By the way, she called these variations, she called them those wretched witches variations. So she wasn't really too big of a fan of this. But they were very close, and Brahms remained a loner for the rest of his life, and I think he had always these feelings for Clara. So I feel it in his music, in other words. I think it's saturated in there. What else I would say is that, I think of Brahms as a paradox of many things. He was, on the one hand, going in the footsteps of Beethoven. People called his 10th symphony, his 1st symphony, Beethoven's 10th, okay? Because it was so Beethoven-esque. But in addition, I think you look at a map and you see Vienna. So Brahms ended up living in Vienna. He was originally from Hamburg. But you look at a map, and Vienna is further east than Prague. And Vienna was always Austro-Hungary. It was not just Austria. And it was always a very diverse place. And I don't think Brahms' music is possible without the Slavic influence. What's this over here? There's a little Eastern Europe in there. There's a little flavor of klezmer. There's a little flavor of gypsy music. And Brahms is not possible without it. It's there for such a notoriously serious guy. One more quick story about Brahms. I hope I didn't tell this last time, that Brahms and Tchaikovsky, they lived around the same time. I think Tchaikovsky is easier to warm up to because his melodies are more catchy. Brahms is a little more, he's from Hamburg, it's a different culture. Tchaikovsky said Brahms' music sounds like dried up, just dusty, academic old stuff. Not very nice. And there's a point there that Brahms was sort of a scholar of Renaissance and Baroque music. He loved the past, so not totally wrong what Tchaikovsky said. Brahms responded by saying that passion without craft and discipline and technique is like a dead reed floating in the wind, kind of like the improvisation at the beginning. That was what he said about Brahms. That's also not very nice. The two of them, though, were actually kind of fond of drinking, and they met in Vienna, and they were standoffish at first, but after having 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 drinks, they really became very friendly, and they liked each other for the rest of their lives. So that's a story about them. Here is Book 2 of the Paganini Variations, how Brahms turns this really bright piece into something wistful, melancholy, and nostalgic. I don't know how, but he does it. He turns it into Brahms. Okay, here it is. Thank you. Now, I play usually some gospel at the end. I always tell you, I grew up in New Jersey with two immigrant parents, a Russian immigrant mother and a Southern Virginia immigrant dad. So that's where the gospel music comes in through my dad. Here is, and speaking of the two different types of music, you know, there's more than two, of course, but classical always seems to seep in for me. I've been playing this very old gospel tune, Wayfaring Stranger, which is such a melting pot of things. It either has Scottish roots or West African roots, or probably both. And a lot of blues musicians play this too, because it has this blues flavor to it. I don't know what it is, but that D sharp and E. It just came in, and so I end up putting that in there somewhere, somehow. So I'm going to play you Wayfaring Stranger with a little bit of that to release. I guess you can have experimental gospel too. So this is going to have, this is maybe less experimental, but a little. I'm going to play to close today, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? I love this song. It's just as old as the hills, and everyone does it. And everyone does it differently. Mississippi John Hurt does it differently from Roy Acuff and the Carter family. It's all different. And I try to mix it all together somehow, and I don't know. But it's about family, and that's what Thanksgiving is about. So in advance, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And thanks for coming to listen to this really odd program. But I hope that it was at least interesting. But yeah, there was some, the Blue Sausage is a very odd piece, but it comes from an odd time. So here is Will the Circle Be Unbroken? Thank you. I don't know what to say. I could do another really quick gospel if you want. I mean, this is, there's no Thanksgiving music really, but this is a harvest song, bringing in the sheaves. Yeah, so this is like the opposite of everything else I've played tonight. It's just fun and it's good. So here, I'm not saying what I did is not good. This is, I'll do it real quick. Here it is, bringing in the sheaves. Thank you. We'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, now can I get it and get it out of the way?
I thought I needed to do one more really old-timey one, so thank you for